like to welcome everyone. My name is Corey Moe. This is my wife Pam, and Honor's here as well. We're going to kind of be talking about gathering wild foods. Let's see. I have to get this slideshow so I can actually advance it. There we go. So yeah, there's a whole big cycle, a gathering cycle of the year that happens, and right now we're kind of still in the beginning of it. We're still in the spring, right? Spring starts with maple tapping, even before spring starts. When we know spring's about to come, we start tapping the maple trees. So we did that, and we cooked all the syrup, and you can see some finished syrup over there. We did that again with the birch trees, and we tapped all those trees, and we got syrup from them as well. And now things are starting to turn green. So there's some interesting little wild foods we can go start harvesting. You can see down here, we've got a few different plants. I guess we'll talk about them individually as we go on. But if you want to follow along with the gathering cycle of the year after this presentation, you can go to the Finland Food Chain website, and under Learn, there's a link to the gathering cycle of the year in Northeast Minnesota. And on that page, oh, got another person wanting to come in. There. On this page here, if you scroll down, if I can advance the slide here, you'll see spring is the first section, obviously, right? So these are the things that we're looking at right now. Now I can't see everything because I've got videos in the way. There we go. So you can see here's maple syrup. We went through that. Birch sap, we did that. Now we're getting into some of the root plants like wild leeks, wild ginger root, and dandelion root. Right now is a good time to dig roots because all of the energy of that plant is still down in that root from winter, and it's about to start putting that energy up into the leaves. That's why in summertime we look at flowers and leaves and fruits, but right now that energy is still mostly in the roots. So this is a good time to harvest those root crops.
Yeah, and that energy is a form of sugars that the plant uses. Which is why later in the year, for example, dandelion root and dandelion leaves, they're very tender and not very bitter at all right now. But if you wait until later in the year, they start getting really quite unpalatably bitter.
Yeah, it doesn't always take very long.
Yes.
No, the roots are almost starting now already, but man, we've made some really good stuff with dandelions this year.
Yes.
So then there's also wild ginger root, which we'll talk about, and then fishing opener, which has happened, and I think suckerfish are either now or already have gone. I know they were about
they're right now, at least.
Right now, so if you want to have a fun experience, go find a creek that's got some suckerfish running up it and try to grab a few. You did that growing up, didn't you, Honor?
Yeah, yeah. It's best if you have some waders, and I don't know, some people really like to do it at night because there's these places where like shallow rivers or shallow streams run into lakes around here, and it's easiest at night in a way because you can look down through the water with your flashlight and see the fish, and then you like basically like you have to do it. Yeah, there's a technique. You just grab them, and it helps when there's a lot of them, so it's easier to grab. You know, when it's easier not to miss, I guess maybe. But yeah, it's pretty easy to grab a bunch of them, and if you have a fishing license, you're allowed to take a bunch of them, and they have they're spawning, so they have eggs, and the eggs are good, and they're fish. They're pretty good. They're pretty tasty. They're not quite the same as a lot of they're sort of I don't know, cartilaginous fish, I guess. They're a little funny that way, but they're good. I don't know. I guess I also want to say we didn't really, now that it seems like almost everybody's in here that's going to be in here, we just kind of got going on this presentation, but when we're talking about something that you have experience with, please feel free to jump in and tell a story about gathering these things. That we want this. We'll have time at the end for questions and discussion too, but we really want to encourage people to interrupt us actually.
Yes, along the way, ask your questions.
And along those lines, have any of you guys ever gone and gathered sucker fish from a creek?
My son has done some gathering of suckers. A few years back, he did that every spring. He doesn't live with us now, so I don't get him.
Oh.
On a related note with the suckerfish, if it's really smelly, but you know, the gardening season is just starting, and fish emulsion is basically like rotting fish that you like concentrated, and you like take a tiny amount and put it in water to like spread it out, and it's really amazing to water your garden with. Like again, it's smelly stuff, but it works. And suckers are one of the easiest ways to get a lot of fish that you can basically put in a tub and let rot. I realize this is gross, but this is what you do if you're really into gardening. So
It's a fermentation.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe that sounds better.
I mean,
Where do you
I think
where do you
both-
store where do
go
you
for it.
store your rotting fish so the bears don't get it?
oh, that's a good one. I Huh. I haven't had that problem, but I haven't done it much either. Like, yeah, it's more of a thing that I've seen other people do, and that's a question I need to ask them. Stefan, our friend, is working on a batch, it sounds like, or is planning to, and maybe we should warn him.
Yeah, there are bears over there. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
So that those wild roots, the wild ginger root, dandelion root, and the ramps or leeks, that's kind of where we're at still in the gathering cycle. But really soon, there's going to be spruce tips. They're starting to swell. They're not quite. It's usually in a few weeks from now. And the cattail shoots are probably actually out there. I haven't gone and looked. I don't know if anyone's gone to look for cattail shoots, but they're pretty good. I've eaten them before. They're kind of like asparagus, sort of. if you don't have any asparagus and need something to eat, they're pretty decent. And I think it's still too early for oyster mushrooms. I don't know, Honor, is this when they start?
It's too dry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very much too dry.
If it was raining now, do you think they would maybe be starting?
Mushrooms are one of those ones that it seems like it takes a little bit longer, but I've definitely found oyster mushrooms as early as June for sure, because June is often a rainier month, and so mushrooms come out once it's rained. It seems like it rains and then there's a flush of mushrooms, and there's different ones throughout the season that kind of go in order, and oysters sometimes seem to be an earlier one, but not always. It depends on usually the thing I do, I have some trees in my neighborhood that I know have oyster mushrooms, and I check them after it rains, and they fruit at least once every year, and so you get one batch off of them if you're paying attention.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the trick with all of this wild foraging, is that you kind of have to have an encyclopedia in your head of, okay, where did I find ramps last year? Where did I find all of those oyster mushrooms? And keeping that log in your head of where you found everything, even if you have to like write it down. Like I just wrote something down the other day. Go by the bushy birch tree, go west, and keep walking until you see that broken tree.
Yeah.
but it's helpful, because then you have somewhat of a record of it, but it's keeping an encyclopedia in your head of where to look for these things, what time of year it is, and heading out.
And I've at least for me, I've really found that our brains are developed to remember those kinds of things. It's easier than remembering a quiz or something, answers to a quiz or something like that. Like there's something in our brain that's really set up to be like, oh, that's that place where I found those wild things, and it's gonna stick in your brain pretty well.
Well, and we're omnivores. I imagine it's like how bears think, you know, bears just kind of like wander from one good thing to eat to the next, and they they, they have a memory of how that works, that they just
Right.
do. And we can do that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
There was a good comment I just saw about suckerfish making great fish patties.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Mike Molesca just said that you can, he included, I think everybody can probably see that if they look at the chat. It says
Yeah.
remove the skin, head, innards, and backbone and run the rest through a meat grinder, alternating with pieces of onion, bread, or cornflake crumbs. Form into patties, coat with breadcrumbs, and place on wax paper to freeze. Once frozen, they can be stored in used bread bags for a month or two. That's
Can
awesome.
we add that to our guide on the website? Do we have permission to share that website or to
The
share that
recipe?
recipe on our
Yeah.
website? Answer when you can.
Super fun.
Oh, I think
Oh, he
there's
said, yeah, he said sure.
awesome. Okay, someone make sure they copy that down. That sounds good. And I do have some recipes for fish cakes, but then they're special family secrets that I'm not allowed to share. So
Oh,
If I can find it, we did this with sucker, but more with pike. I used to can fish so that I could make fish cakes all year long. And it's a really great, super simple way to put up all that extra pike and sucker that's hard to, it's not easy cooking.
Yeah.
But canning it with a little bit of vinegar and ketchup dissolves the bone and the cartilage. And so it just becomes, like lovely fish cake stuff.
I've really been wanting to do that. I know Honor's
Yeah.
done a lot of fish canning before. I've
Yeah.
been really wanting to experiment with sort of smoked fish, canning smoked fish, sort of like kipper snacks or something like that. And yeah, it's one of my goals. I haven't done it yet. So
Yeah, I know a guy who lives down in Little Marais that does that. He smokes fish and then cans it, and it's really, really good.
bet.
There's
So
another
oh, go ahead.
there's another fish cake recipe on Tofty Charter's website, and it's really a good one. And what they do is they make their batter ahead of time and freeze it in portions, so the batter's frozen, and then they can just thaw it out later.
Nice.
And
Nice.
the recipe's on their website.
Perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got a batch frozen in my freezer right now that I just saw that I need to. Oh, here we go. We're apparently sliding through our slides. So another thing that's just barely starting right now, we have a picture of it, is wild mint. These mints are just showing up in little tiny rosettes. They're usable. They're really good right now, but not quite. And cow parsnip, Honor, you're a lot more familiar with that. I need to learn more about cow parsnip, but is it time now or?
Yeah, especially because once it gets too big, it gets bitter, kind of like dandelion leaves and roots do. It's did we have a picture of it? I'm sorry.
I don't have a picture of
Oh,
cow
I need to
parsnip.
get one. It's it's a thing that when you're gathering like wild ramps, it often grows in the same places, and there's a lot of those kind of spring ephemerals that grow in the same places.
Yeah.
So like cow parsnip is one that it smells and tastes a bit like celery, and it's really good in soup. It's I would imagine you can, I'm sorry we don't have a picture of it, but I would imagine you could look up a picture of it on the internet. And once it gets, more than, oh, sorry, that doesn't work, more than a few inches tall, it doesn't taste the same anymore. But it's easy to gather when you're gathering things like wild ramps or wild ginger. Similarly, I know like spring beauties, they're little kind of whitish flowers with like kind of streaks of pink, and they're very pretty in the spring, and they have little tiny tubers as for roots that are referred to as fairy spuds, because they're like potatoes for little people.
I didn't know that. There's lots of those
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, it's a really fun one, and it's, again, you're not gonna get a huge meal out of it because you have to dig up a lot of them to get very much because they're so tiny. But it is a thing that people talk about using as like a survival food in the spring. They're one of the first things that comes out, and you can find them. And that way, in the old days when people had depleted their food stores and spring came, they were like waiting for this kind of stuff. It's like they probably you know, ate a lot of wild ramps and dug those little tiny fairy spuds up and, you know, did what they could with them. So it's nice to know. And it's also fun because they're such a pretty flower that it's kind of cute to think of them having these little baby potatoes underneath them.
I actually even saw several spring beauties in wild ramp patches when we were out harvesting yesterday. So it's kind of cool they're together too.
Honor, I have a question. First, I found some cow parsnip. I don't know if you can see it or not. Is this a horrible idea?
Here, you know,
The,
move it up. Let me see if I can make your
one?
screen big.
that one. That's cow parsnip.
Right. And that's the flower from what I can see
Right,
of that
and
picture.
that's what my question for you was. What part of cow parsnip do you eat?
It's like the leaf, the very developing shoots and the leaves.
Okay.
Can you put it back up real quick so we can see? I've got your big screen now.
Yeah. I can't see what's going on, so can you see it?
Yeah, it's
think
that
so.
one.
Pretty want to point this again. And Kurt
With-
wanted to
Yeah, there you
caution.
go.
Perfect.
Kurt wanted to caution that wild parsnip or cow parsnip looks a lot like water hemlock, which is poisonous.
Yeah.
Be very careful.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. Because like I said, I've only ever gathered it in the spring. I wouldn't gather it, and I've only gathered it when I knew what it was for sure. And I know what it is, I guess, personally by like kind of crushing the leaves and smelling it. I don't know what water hemlock looks like, so I guess I need to research that.
Sorry, I'm looking at a zoom. It says zoom, and I'm no longer seeing everything.
Oh, change your window, I think. Now I've got it back up and you should be able to see my screen, I think, right? Are we back to the presentation?
Okay.
While you're figuring that out, another thing during gathering of like spring ephemerals is Clintonia is like a leaf that looks a little bit like wild ramp leaves, but a bit different. It comes a little later and it's shinier. And that's another one that if you gather it when it's very tiny, it tastes like cucumber, but as soon as it gets bigger, it tastes bitter. And there's like just things like that that often when they're small, they're okay and they're not, I don't know. I'm not sure that it's harmful when it's bigger. It just doesn't taste good, but I equate tasting nasty with being harmful for me.
Yes.
And then another thing that I don't think we have on here, or maybe we do, is fiddleheads.
Yep.
And that's another one of those ones that's like, when they're small, they're better obviously when they unfurl, but then there's some caution with that as well, that you want to dip them in boiling water first or blanch them.
I've heard a lot of people say even change your water a few times. I don't know. There's some indication that there's some toxic compound in there that may be associated with stomach cancer. So I figure be cautious, but they're good. So
yeah, I eat I mean, it's the kind of thing I eat a few every year and I like them, but it's like, it seems to me that we only eat them at one time a year, and so it's probably not super harmful. If they are harmful, unless you eat them in very large quantities, but again, it just pays to be careful. So blanching them is a good idea. It also makes them more tender and retain their green color.
So let's see. So that's kind of what we have. That's what we're looking at in the spring. I'm gonna move it here to, if I can figure out how to move this slide forward, move it to the next slide. So we've talked about them already, but who knows what those are?
Ramps.
Ramps, yeah. Yeah, so Pam and I went out harvesting ramps yesterday, and I'm sure most of you have probably gone out harvesting ramps before, but this is just a nice little example of, this part of the spring is just ending right now because things are starting to green up, but the ramps come out and turn green before anything else does on the forest floor. So when you go out early, you can see, just like in these pictures, these little patches, and sometimes they're much bigger and much fuller, and sometimes they cover the whole forest floor. But these patches of green really stand out. So it's always good to go before everything springs up and turns green, which it's starting to right now. It's just starting to get a little bit more hard to spot them. But knowing where all those patches are, and then you can wait a little bit until they get big, because they're starting to put a lot of flowers out on the ramps and stuff too. I think this is the time to get them if you're gonna get them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
the leaves start to break down and no longer be visible, edible after a little
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, you can
So-
see the size of what they are right now. They're about, what would you say, like 5 to 6 inches tall, and they're a spear shaped leaf. And a lot of them did have their flower stalks coming up. And I noticed if you know, a stick or another basket or a foot accidentally touched them, they were bruising very easily. And so this is
Yeah.
very tail end of gathering for the ramps.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat about do we take the bulbs? And
Yeah.
that's one of those debates, I guess.
Yes,
Right.
yes, it is.
I think no matter, and this is something we need to talk about for wild harvesting and everything. No
In
matter
general,
what,
yes.
you need to be considerate of the resource you're taking, how long it took for those plants to grow, and the realization that other animals and other things want to eat some of that, and the fact that we need to keep those patches healthy. So for the most part, I pick a lot of leaves, and we do dig some of the tubers. You can get a lot of leaves. So really, I mean, like, we were at the point yesterday when we were gathering that we just couldn't fit any more into our basket, and we had to stop. It wasn't that there weren't any more. So you can get plenty with the leaves. The onions are really good, and they're really nice, and they really do bulk out whatever you're making. So I think it's okay to dig some bulbs sometimes if you have a patch that you're maintaining and you know no one else is going to be looking for it. I think it's a matter of each case. Think about the resource you have.
Yeah, so in the example of ramps, the ramp plant will put up 2 to 3 leaves. What I normally do is if it's only got 2 leaves, I'll take 1 leaf off of that plant. So I'm leaving that plant a leaf so that it can continue to grow and to flourish, and it's going to possibly put up another seed head. If it's got 3, maybe I'll take 1, but maybe I'll take 2. And yeah, like Corey said, sometimes it's taking the roots, but definitely not all the time. And it does depend on the healthiness and the vigorousness of that particular patch. So one patch might be enormous and very, very densely planted. So yeah, you could probably take several roots. But if there's like a single plant, just randomly out there somewhere, I wouldn't even pick the leaves of that one. I want to let that flourish so that it can grow up. And next year in my encyclopedia, when I come back to this one plant, I can see it's got 3 plants now, and it can grow. And we try to do that with every with every wild plant that we're harvesting, not just ramps, because for example, dandelions, my girls and I are going to go out and pick some dandelion flowers this afternoon for some dandelion jelly. And while that's fabulous, and while we want to make as much jelly as we can because the dandelions are only here for so long, they are also the first foods for honeybees. And we want to make sure that we're not taking every single dandelion, because then the honeybees are not going to have anything. Even in like just the small area of my front yard, where dandelions seem to be plentiful, that's a long distance for a honeybee to travel. So again, keeping mindful of that.
And there's places where the entire forest floor is covered for acres in wild ramps. And I think if that's where you are, you probably don't have to be too cautious about digging a few roots. But yeah, so just being aware of what your resources are.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are too. I mean, we live in a pretty lower population area, and we have, like I have a ramp patch in my backyard that I know I'm pretty much the only one harvesting, and I do it every year, so I can kind of monitor and make sure that it's still healthy. Whereas if you're in a more populated area, like I have no idea how it works in a place like Duluth or somewhere where maybe like hundreds of people are harvesting from the same patch. So I guess that's something to pay attention to. And my understanding too is that the bulbs are the part of the plant that takes the longest to grow and achieve that's like the longevity of the whole patch, is the bulbs being healthy.
that is a good point. That if you are in a more populated area, you do have to make sure that you know what has happened in that area. For example, you don't want someone who is spraying their dandelions with Roundup
Oh,
and then
that too.
harvesting that
Yeah.
Roundup and making something out of it that's just concentrated Roundup and dandelions.
Right.
And part of this is the experience of being with this plant in the woods, right? Like these wild ramps, this is a really cool plant. They're an ephemeral plant, right? So they take advantage of the light on the forest floor before the leaves come out in the spring, and that's their chance to photosynthesize and get all their energy. And then once the leaves come out, they pretty much just disappear until the next year after the flowers are there. So it's a really cool moment to just be present in. That's a part of harvesting, I think, is being
Yeah.
present and remembering to be a human, right? That's something on our we talk about.
There's some comments, some super good comments. There's a recipe from the Forager chef for ramp salsa verde, which sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Lori's asking about if we're more likely to find ramps in drier or wetter areas. Kind of
Wetter, but both?
intermediary, both a little bit. It's more under like maple trees is kind of my
And
my
pop
experience.
trees. I learned this yesterday that there's 2 types of ramps that we have, and I don't know a ton about the different types, so that might be part of the reason it's hard to pin them down. But there's the ones that have red on the bottom, and there's ones that are just green on the bottom. And I didn't know this, but they're different
Yeah,
types
me
of
neither.
ramps. And the red ones grow bigger.
Yes.
Cool.
Well, yeah, you can see in the picture that Corey has up right now, there on the top of the basket, there's some leaves, and you can see at the very bottom of the tip of the leaf where it would have been growing out of the soil, it's tinged with a little bit of what looks like red. And so that
Yeah.
some red.
So I didn't learn that until after my day of harvesting. So next time I go out, I want to look and see, is it different? Are those red ones? I think the red ones might be more in the wetter areas, and maybe the green ones are in the more drier areas, because they definitely do grow in rather dry areas too.
Yeah.
So who knows what this is?
Is it a wild violet?
I heard wild ginger. That's what it is. Wait, I got a really good echo going. Yeah, so this is wild ginger. It's a little bit fuzzy. This is the young leaf here. You can see it kind of makes like a heart shape, but it actually curls in and makes a little circle right where the stem connects to the leaf. So that trait right there is really unique in the forest. The purple aster make sort of a heart-shaped leaf, but they don't make this little loop in here. So,
And
purple
Lori's
aster-
right too. It does look a little bit like wild violet, but wild violet leaves are going to be smaller, and the ginger leaves are going to get a lot bigger and
right?
be hairier. They're
Yeah.
hairy.
Yeah, they're like fuzzy. They're super fuzzy. You can even see on these, there's a small plant next to it. So here, I pulled the leaves and some of the dirt away, and you can see this root coming off, and this root will just keep extending and extending if you follow it. And if you pinch, you can dig that root out. Don't eat the plant part or the flower. Those have toxins in them. They'll make your stomach upset. Not good. But the root actually has the opposite effect. The root is good for stomach problems. And it works very similar to Asian ginger, but it's not related to Asian ginger at all. It's actually closer related to a pine tree. So, but the medicinal qualities and the flavor are rather similar. I've really enjoyed using it over the years. So, yeah, that's kind of a fun one. I bet everyone knows what that is.
Some people love them and some people hate them.
Right? I'm not especially fond of them in the garden, which is where this one is, but I thought that was a good picture. You can really see the dandelion. But man, are they amazing for food. You can eat, and right now, before they turn bitter, because the later in the year, like we were saying, the leaves and the root can turn more bitter, but the roots, look how big these roots are in this one over in the corner here, and that's not uncommon. I mean, you can find lots of them, and that's one of the nice things, that they're weeds in the garden. Well, they grow even nicer in the garden. So in the spring, you can dig those up and use them for cooking. And I don't know if you've ever experienced eating a little bit of dandelion and it was bitter, because that's what happens later in the season. But right now, it's almost amazing how almost sweet the greens are. And we did an experiment. My mom actually, she adopted my grandmother's recipe for spinach pie, and we just only used dandelion greens, and a lot of dandelion greens. And it was, oh, is it going to be too bitter? Is it going to be all right? We were like, oh, worried about it. And we're like, I think it's going to be okay. It's still pretty early. And my goodness, it was not bitter, not in the least bit. It was delicious.
Yes.
The whole family just loved it. So really, especially, you know, like right now, we don't necessarily have access to as much fresh produce all the time. Having some greens in the spring is really nice, and they're probably right in your front yard right now.
And dandelion are like a nutritional powerhouse. They are packed with so many vitamins. It's crazy. Like the Latin name, do you remember that? The Latin name means like lion of, no.
The official cure of diseases, something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
My
So-
mom makes, every spring, my mom makes a salad out of dandelion greens that, they're good with bacon grease.
Yeah.
Like she fries up bacon bits, and then uses the bacon bits in the salad with the greens, and then the bacon grease as part of the dressing that she makes. And it's kind of, it's a wilted salad, I guess you would call it, and it's really, really good.
Kind of similar to the one I did in the video then on the Gathering Tickle of the Year, maybe. It's, I guess I did candied bacon in that one, but
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I guess I forgot about that. I don't know. Everything's better with bacon unless you don't eat bacon, sadly.
and somehow, crazy, we had a pig last year that we raised on our farm, and somehow one of the things that seems to still be around is bacon. I've never experienced this before, so apparently we have extra bacon this year, so putting bacon in everything is a good idea. Who knows what this is? This, I just saw, this picture was just from a little
That's
bit ago.
plantain.
Yeah. So plantain is an amazing medicine. It's really good for, for burns and cuts and that kind of a thing. Just amazing. It helps to pull pain out, and it helps heal really, really quickly.
I've used it for a toothache before.
Chew it up and put it in on your tooth. But it's also edible. It's a perfectly edible green. You can use it in salads and cooked and stuff too. So they're just popping out as well. So there's a lot of new fresh greens you can get out and eat. I think a plantain, dandelion, and wild ramp salad with bacon sounds really good.
Lunch.
Yeah, lunch.
That's
Yeah,
lunch right
we got a plan. So another thing out there, and Honor was excited about this, and I am too, is when the local commercial fishermen are pulling trout out of Lake Superior, and you can go buy trout fillets from local fishermen, as we have, right, Honor?
Yeah. I have my stepdad goes down. He likes to do the circuit in the morning and go check on the fish situation. He knows all the fishermen, so he goes down and visits with like Clinton Maxwell and the Svays and people like that to see what they've been catching. And we have on our website, on the Finland Food Chain website, we have the basic contact info, or at least the locations of the commercial fishing folks that we know of. And if there's more, please let us know, because we'd probably like to add them on here.
Yes.
But yeah, they may, I believe it's just the month of May. And then again in the fall, there's a lake trout season, and they set nets for lake trout. And yeah, I was supposed to give Corey and Pam half of the the batch, because they've been asking for it, and I ate it all. I ate it all. I like smeared ramp pesto all over it and baked it, and I ate it all. Sorry guys.
It's okay.
It's very easy to do.
We did the other night with some of the trout we had from the last time. We got some I have lovage growing in the garden, so that's one of the early garden greens that are coming up right now, and I chopped that up with some walking onion, some like perennial onion tops, and just chopped all that up finely and sprinkled it all over them and baked them, and oh my goodness, with a little bit of wild ramp salt on top, oh my gosh, it was so good.
And I'm not super sure this year, but it sounds like a lot of these commercial fishing folks sell to restaurants, and they're not able to sell as much to restaurants right now because of the situation with COVID. So there's a good chance that they have fish and that they need to sell it. So just saying.
Hold on. Support them. And we have listed on our local food directory here. I suppose I should explain. So either when you go to the Finland Food Chain website, finlandfoodchain.org, on every website there's these big kind of reddish orange letters that say find local food, and that connects to our local directory. I'm in the process of revamping that a little bit to make it easier to use. You can download the full directory, but we have several of, oh, I'm sliding. I don't know how to use this thing. We have several of the different food product options built into a more dynamic website now. And this is the Lake Superior Fish section. We have listed Dahl's Commercial Fishing and Jason Bradley's Commercial Fishing. I don't have any of their contact information. So if anyone knows that, how to contact them or other people who are doing commercial fishing, let us know so we can add them to this list so that we can help people get out there and support them. So that's spring, and really any questions you guys have about spring, jump in at any point, and I think we'll probably do another one of these for summer as berries and mushrooms and cherries and June berries and wild rice later in the season comes, and we'll do the fall with more berries and apples, fruits, and more mushrooms, and that's the next time when fish roe becomes a thing. I think this is whitefish roe that we got from Whitefish Netting one year. Honor and I made some caviar. And winter, which does have a few wild food harvesting options and wild medicine harvesting options. But yeah, I think really we want to make sure that this space is open for you all to ask questions. What do you want to know? What experiences do you have? What did we get wrong? I mean,
Yeah.
really, that's the idea here, is to open a conversation.
I realize right now we're limited as far as social interactions, but I would dearly love to maybe once a quarter throughout the growing season, if we could get a group together to take a walk through the woods to really hands-on identify plants and talk about the things so that we can really see visually what we're looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, and that isn't totally outside the realm of what could happen. It's just a distance walk, you know.
So I'm gonna try to. If you go to the Gathering Cycle of the Year website, there is a video of me kind of walking around and looking at stuff. It was from a couple weeks ago. I'm gonna try to keep doing that.
That'd be awesome.
Every once in a while, just because, yeah, I know. I mean, like this is good to learn about what's available, but the hands-on learning of what that plant looks like in the real world and what it's like, and what it's like digging it and stuff, that you really need to be out in the woods doing that. I was trying to figure out, like, how do I do this presentation wandering around in the woods, and I don't think it's gonna work, but I can take videos, so I'm gonna keep doing that.
I'm a book lover, and I have some books. Can I share a couple with you
Yeah.
that I would recommend getting? I don't know that you can even see it. This is called Plants Have So Much to Give Us. All we have to do by ask, and it's Anishinaabe's Botanical Teachings. It's Corey and Pam, do you guys have this one?
I'm not sure
I
if we
don't
have
think so.
that one. No.
So good. It's recipes and stories, and it's just the richest thing. It's by a woman named Mary Sissip Jenny. I can put this in the chat thing too.
Yeah, do that.
The other one I would really recommend if you're interested in this kind of stuff is Matthew Elf, ALFS, Edible and Medicinal Wild Plants of the Midwest. really good. It's got everything you want in it. And then I actually have probably 20 books. I'm
Yeah.
allowing myself down here. But this one I just picked up. A friend gave it to me.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
It's really interesting. And for example, I can't wait to make beans with a cedar bough in them because that just
Oh,
sounds
so
really
good.
interesting. But he's got a lot of stuff in here about gathering and about processing. For example, I'm going to try making acorn flour this year, which I've never done
Got it.
before.
We've got
so
some processing
yeah,
right now.
it's a good one.
That's so cool. Yeah, yeah. No, I love the sushi. Sean Sherman is amazing. I've had the pleasure of getting to eat some meals he's prepared before, and one of my favorite quotes from Sean Sherman
Yeah.
is he prepared this just beautiful meal, and he brought it all out, and there's this hominy soup and wild rice, all these different things, and he came out and he wanted to present the food, and he said, you know, everything in this meal is vegan. Even the bison was a vegan.
Oh my.
But yeah, he really, really has inspired me in looking at what ingredients are here and how do we use them, not necessarily trying to recreate old foods, but here's the ingredients, be creative. What can we make out of it? What can we do out of it? So I've really tried to live that idea a lot.
Well, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, this is native land and those folks knew how to use the plants and animals around them before we were here. You know?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Yes. And
yeah,
that
Corey and I had the experience of being invited to Fond du Lac to give this part of this presentation, and we were just like, "How? What?"
White people on the res
Yeah,
talking about plants, and it worked out well.
It was intense. It was amazing. It was really, we were just like, how about you guys tell us?
Yeah.
So we had a really good, that's where we're like, this is a conversation. It's not meant to be a lecture, you know, like we want to learn from the people that we're talking with.
Yeah.
About what you guys do too.
Oh, I've got the view up where I can see everyone now. This is nice. Yeah, any other thoughts anyone has?
Hi, it's Viola over here. I have a question about horsetails that I had difficulty to actually find my way online, just Googling.
Yeah.
So there are the parts of the horsetail that have the needles, and then there are those other stalks with the, I think it's with the spores, or I'm not sure. And I've heard those are edible, and a bit like asparagus. Do you know anything about it? And
yeah. I mean, I know them more on a medicinal value. They're very high in silica. And actually, as a practical thing, they used to be used for cleaning a lot, and because they have these really abrasive compounds in them. I know that they're supposed to be really good for teeth. You can brush your teeth with them in certain ways.
They're really good topically, like on skin, if you have skin conditions, like a toenail fungus or even eczema. I've heard is good for.
I'm not sure about about the edibility or the different. I think the two things you're looking at, the two different types of stalks, is the immature and then the mature stalk. They start as sort of little, I don't know how to explain them, little sticks kind of, and then as they get bigger, they unfurl and kind of look like these little teeny tiny pine trees. They're ancient. They're a super, super ancient part of our forest, one of the oldest parts. They're from the old boreal, the full old growth boreal forests. But yeah, I would look further into that. The silica content, I could see being an issue if you were eating a lot of them. I don't know. Does anyone else have any insight on horsetail?
Yeah, I don't know about them. I mean, I know what they look like, and I know what you've said about them being good for the cleaning thing. I think they were kind of like crushed up and used as sort of a soap kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I've never done that, and I've never eaten them either. And I'm wondering if it's when they're immature, if they're just easier. That's when they're probably edible if they are.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
they're popping up right now. I did see them out there.
maybe Betsy's
Yeah.
looking it up in her book right now.
The kind of almost translucent stalks. So
I didn't hear that. What was that?
there are those kind of the thicker, almost translucent stalks. It makes sense that one would be the mature version and one would be the immature version, but they just look so different.
Mhm.
So it feels,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
it
Well, and I
definitely
think
is
they're-
dinosaur food.
I think
They're
there
so-
are different varieties of
Yeah.
those. I think they're all fairly similar, but there's lots of, I've seen different sizes and different kind of slightly, I don't know, because like what Corey was saying, they're one of the things that evolved, you know, definitely before flowering plants,
Mhm.
and definitely back when, you know, in the like early dinosaur stuff or something,
Yeah.
earlier than that, you know.
I think much of our oil is made out of them. That's what was depressed and
Oh
created
yeah.
oil that
Yeah,
was-
like the
yeah, they're really old, and they
the
used to be.
carboniferous. There we go. I just remembered it.
And
I
the
was wondering how to identify the oyster mushrooms.
Ooh.
I'm always leery. I never pick mushrooms unless I've got Kurt
They're-
Meeker or something to say.
Yeah, and that's
okay.
it's a good idea. You should always make sure you know what it is before you ingest it.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
So oyster mushrooms grow on hardwood trees. The first ones that what I've observed is, yeah, there's a picture, good one. They fruit on like popple or aspen trees first around here from what I've seen after a rain. And then maple after that is what I've seen. And it's kind of got to do with, I think, like the amount of water. They take a lot of water to start to fruit, and like aspen will absorb water faster than like maple will, is one of them. And like where I've found them is on standing dead aspen trees, like that have like the top has fallen off, but the trunk is still there. It's like the water when it rains gets inside the top of the tree trunk and percolates down, and then somewhere along the line there's a oyster mycelium that shoots out the side and has a mushroom, and they're whitish yellow. There's a lot of different varieties of them too, but around here they're like kind of whitish brown, and they do, like Corey's picture illustrates, kind of look like they're sort of oblong, and that's why they're called oyster mushrooms. And they have a distinctive smell. They smell just slightly like anise or licorice. But I would recommend getting a mushroom guide and, you know, taking a spore print to be relatively sure, or having someone who knows about
Get a
mushrooms
mushroom person.
yeah.
show you. Yeah, because we have some really good mushroom people around here. Well, Rabbit Smallwood, she's really good. She's very shy, but she's really good with mushrooms. I feel very confident about identifying oyster mushrooms at this stage. They were one of the first ones I learned about. And then, you know, the guy at the Mariner Motel, he's really good with mushrooms.
Thank
I
you.
can't remember his name, and there's other people too.
Yeah. So the ones in the photo here, these are domestic ones that I grew actually in my kitchen, but it does show kind of how they look. The domestic ones, it was weird. They didn't have the smell that I'm used to having them. They were really kind of just
Oh, really?
really good, but they were a little different. But they do grow kind of in these little clumps like that. You can see, and they've got true gills and all of that. But yeah, definitely any mushroom you should really learn from someone. That's the best way to do it. Because otherwise there's always that leap of faith where you're like, I'm pretty sure this is the right mushroom, and I don't know. I'm not a big fan of taking that kind of a leap of faith.
Yeah, there are some dangerous mushrooms out there for sure. There's a saying in the mushroom community that all mushrooms are edible, but some are only edible once.
Yeah.
Well, and they're also another important thing about wild mushroom gathering is that it's important to cook them thoroughly. We're used to eating like mushrooms from the grocery store that you can eat raw or cooked. But wild mushrooms, you're more people are, if they're not cooked, that's when a lot of times when people have reactions to them. It's just
Someone's
that's
asking
the
for a
safe way, I
class.
guess. Yeah, we should have a mushroom class. But I mean, that's the thing. I know the ones I know. I'm not an expert on mushrooms at all, but there's so much to learn about mushrooms. That's the thing. It's like you learn like one of them at a time. Like, okay,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
one's I feel confident about. Like I learned about, I guess, puffballs as a little kid from my mom, and then as an adult, I feel like I've really branched out into like oyster mushrooms and chanterelles, and boletes is a whole ball game of like
Yeah.
some of them
Yeah,
are
I think
some of them are
that's good
easier than
advice.
others, and yeah.
I think that's good advice to learn it one mushroom at a time. Actually, that's how I started, was with chanterelle mushrooms. I learned what the physical features of it were, but then I also learned this is what chanterelles are, but here is the dangerous look-alike. You know, you have
Right.
to look out for example, with chanterelles, you have to look out for something called jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah.
And this is what a jack-o'-lantern looks like. This is how it's different, and this is how you can differentiate between the two.
And it helps if you can have them both side by side and see,
Yeah.
because then you know. And sometimes you do that for years. Sometimes you're like, every year you're like, here's the chanterelle, here's the jack-o'-lantern. Oh yes, I remember now.
That's sort of one of the hierarchies kind of learning mushrooms too, is some mushrooms it's really easy to tell, you know, like there's only one look-alike and it's pretty simple to know that this is it. And some mushrooms have super deadly look-alikes that are not easy to tell.
Yeah.
So chanterelles are a good one where it's, if you learn the features like false gills instead of true gills, that's like the main thing. And it's really easy to tell whether or not they're true gills. And you can pretty much always know, oh, this is definitely a chanterelle or not. But that's not the case for all of them.
Along these lines, we absolutely need to talk about morels.
Oh, it's time.
Right now.
I've only ever found one in my garden randomly. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that is, it kind of illustrates the point we were just talking about too, is that Corey and I went looking for morels a couple years back because we got all excited about morels, and we were trying to learn about them, and we got some advice from some folks who had found some. We went out looking and we found what we thought were morels. We got super excited about it, and we took them back, and we actually gave them to the friend who we had been getting the advice from, and he was thinking about eating them, but he didn't. And then he thought about it and was like, these don't look quite right. And he looked it up, and there is a false morel that is what they were. And it's interesting because a false morel, some of the false morels, you can eat and they don't affect people. Certain people, they don't bother them, and some people it, you know, gives them major gastric distress. So I'm really glad he didn't eat them. But that was interesting because we just as easily could have eaten them ourselves, and we were just kind of going off of like the basic description and the basic description of where they ought to be found. And it's easy to mess up. So having a good guidebook and making sure you're showing them to somebody who actually knows, because that was the other thing. He had found some, but it had been a while and he wasn't sure.
Right.
So anyway, but morels grow in the spring, right about now when the leaves are barely coming out. There's not a lot of them grow around here in northern Minnesota, I don't think, but they do in certain places, like in burned areas. Just kind of disturbed ground, I guess, is one of the criteria I know of. But I'm also there, and they're also really hard to spot. And I've only just started to learn how to spot them, and it's like a thing that I think once you learn how to spot them, you spot them easier. But man, I looked for years before I found one. I don't know, does anybody else have any experience with that, with morels? That would be fun to hear about.
I have a couple decades of experience with morels in northern Michigan.
Ooh.
And I still don't know where the public lands are here. I live in Duluth,
Mhm.
and I haven't figured out where I can go. It kind of drives me nuts. I have a log farm under my new deck, getting ready, like, gonna grow mushrooms. But so the morels are the lookalike is super easy to tell the difference. So a real morel, if you imagine this little mushroom as if it were a balloon and someone had blown it up, it's completely, if you slice it down the middle, it's totally hollow, like you'd sliced a balloon in half. And a false morel has a stem and a cap that connects like that. So if the cap isn't, if it's not a balloon, it's not a morel. It's a false morel.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, so it's that simple.
Cool.
And they look alike, but the false ones, you'll know as soon as you see one that they're faking it. They just want to be a morel. Yeah, they come out in sequence. The first ones that come out are the black morels, and they have a much more intense flavor, much more almost like gourmet. And those grow around black ash trees. Not the swampy kind so much, but find white and black ash trees, and you'll, and this time of year you can know because they're the last ones to leaf out. So once everything's leafed out, look for the tree with no leaves and kind of clubby looking branches, and that's an ash tree. And go to the base of that. And don't look from the top down. Get down on the ground and look like this. And you'll see them. They're like little fairies saying, oh.
Cool.
I'm yummy.
So they also grow on elm, but you know, with the Dutch elm disease, there's not so many of those, but you can find them still. And they're, you know, the shape of the tree is like that, right? So if there's still an elm around, they have a particular shape, and they're often around elm trees. And the next ones to come are the white morels, and there's yellow whites and gray whites, but they're the same thing, slightly different colors. Those like old apple orchards.
Ooh.
And like what you say, disturbed soil, like roadsides, that totally random, like it's right in the middle of the grass on a 2-track. They're much more random and much easier to find and bigger. And they have like a thicker meat to them. They hold up to being, you know, dipped in flour and fried in butter. Whereas the black morels are delicate and thinner, so that you just want the butter, not the breading. And the blacks come first, and then the whites come after. So we're right in that phase, at least in northern Michigan. It would be like third week of June, of May, when they would start coming on. So right now, it's worth looking. I follow the Minnesota Mushroom Facebook group, and they're not here yet. They're starting to show up, just like a couple around Hinckley. So give it another week and more water.
Yeah.
We need rain, and the soil has to be 50 degrees or higher.
Okay.
And we've barely had the air above 50 for enough days. So when the soil gets above 50, then they'll pop.
Cool.
And after them come the oysters.
Yeah.
You should always walk with a stick so you can knock them off if you can't reach them.
Yeah.
I'm a mushroom fanatic and haven't been able to hunt here because I don't know the land well enough yet.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all that, Tracy.
Yeah.
We should go on a mushroom hunt sometime.
We totally should.
So
I'm sorry, by the way, Lake County has a plot map where you can take a look and see where the state land is, where the county land is, where all of that is. It's on the Lake County website.
And my dad actually was just saying that they now have an app on the Lake County website that is like sort of like a map. So it shows you on that map, so you can see where you are and where the public land is.
Oh my gosh,
Cool.
that's fantastic.
I haven't tried it yet, but he was just telling me about it.
I was about to go to the DNR and find myself a forester who could tell me where the particular, I used to be married to a forester, so I know this trick, where the particular tree stands are that support that particular soil. That grows
Cool.
Ooh,
Good idea.
yeah.
Talk to your forester.
Another thing you can ask your forester is where they have recent burns, so
Yeah.
you can find out the burned areas.
And for the oysters, even a recent cut, If it was cut last year, hardwood or particularly popple, it'll explode this year after a few rains in June with oysters.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Burn areas are really good for wild berries as well. Like blueberries really like burned areas.
Yeah.
All right, folks, it's 11, so we should probably try to wrap it up. But if anyone has any more last minute questions, go for it.
Thanks a lot for hosting this. It was great.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. This was fun.
Oh, hey, Betsy found that traditionally horsetail was made into a tea along with horse mint for constipation and a sick stomach. And that
Well,
was
that's good to know.
the plants used by the Great Lakes Ojibwe. And if Betsy could give us, Betsy, if you could give us a list of the titles. Well, you have some of the titles of your books, but maybe if you want to email me some of them, we'll send out a follow-up email for this presentation with like the video of it and maybe some supportive resources, and we could include the book in that for people who are interested.
Yeah, we might even put this video in the Gathering Cycle of the Year on the guide so you can watch it right there. All right, well, thank you guys, and make sure you check out finlandfoodchain.org and our Facebook page because we're going to keep doing fun things and we want you to be part of them. So thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Honor. That was great.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
To have a foraging community.
Right. All right, well, you guys enjoy your weekend and we'll have another presentation soon, I'm sure.
You
Bye
too.
everybody.
Bye.